Seems fair to me.
Yes, he did.
Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it look
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Hey, thanks for joining us for another edition of Donnybrook. Great to have you with us. And we have a great guest halfway through. Dr. Ken Haller from the St. Louis University School of Medicine and Cardinal Glennon Pediatrics will be with us to talk about kids and COVID-19, summer camp, and more. Let's first meet our panelists, starting with the big news director for the Big 550, KTRS, and the co-host of the Jennifer and Wendy Show, Wendy Wiese.
You're in
along
trouble
with
now.
Mr. Bill McClellan from your St. Louis Post-Dispatch and STLtoday.com, from the Riverfront Times, the Big 550, and RawStory.com, one of our founders, Mr. Ray Hartmann. And we welcome news editor from the St. Louis American, Alvin Reid, with whom we will kick off the program because there was startling news today in the sports world. We don't ordinarily broach this topic, but this is a big one, folks. How many times does an athlete get a statue in St. Louis while he's playing? That was the case with Albert Pujols. He had many great years here. He's a future Hall of Famer, but he was cut today by the Angels. And now the question, Alvin, is, even though he's not batting 200, should the Cardinals pick him up?
Well, I've been living these, Bill McClellan hours here. And now that I have to go to work every day, this actually broke while I was at the American. And I was kind of like, well, what's going on? Now, one thing that apparently he was not in the lineup last night, and he would be facing a pitcher that he had great success against. And I guess it kind of rubbed him the wrong way. And allegedly there was some type of incident. And this may have led to his, assignment to the wherever, but he's basically waived. No, leave him alone, Cardinals. He was a great Cardinal. He'll probably go into the Hall of Fame as a Cardinal, but we don't need him. We have a solid team, and unless he can play outfield, then that's not going to happen. He would probably hit the home run that would propel the Cardinals to the playoffs or National League Championship Series, but that's a long way from here, and I'm very wary of him. I do know where he is going to end up, though, and I'll tell you right now. He will be wearing a Chicago White Sox uniform, be a DH, and play for Tony La Russa. Okay. You heard it here first.
But that's a good enough reason for me to get him. I'd like to say, it's pure, I'll agree with you. It's pure sentiment. It isn't, sabermetrics by any means. But I think you're right about that one home run, and the Cardinals and their fans will get the money's worth, I think, out of having an occasional big hit from him, which is, you're right. Plus, you never know if somebody's, having him as a backup first baseman and bat off the bench. I'd take my chances over Matt Carpenter with him as a pinch hitter for the.
Excellent point. Yeah.
And so
good point. Excellent point.
I don't want to be part of the haters, but I think it'd be a cool move for them to get Albert Pujols. And I hate to see Tony La Russa get anything.
I would love to see him come back. Baseball is all about sentiment, and after a pandemic, I think that would be the cherry on top of his career. And for people who still miss him as a pinch hitter.
Well, I think giving the fans another chance to see Albert Pujols would be a smart thing. I remember one year when the Cubs were signing children of their former players. They had Gary Matthews Jr., they had Randy Hundley's son. I thought, well, this is kind of fun. And so if I were the Cardinals, I'd sign Pujols and, let him pinch hit occasionally.
Well, let me just say, I'm going to agree with Alvin because there's something called Irish Alzheimer's, where you forget everything but your grudges. And he left us, and I can't forget that. So.
Oh, come on, Charlie. That was a total. You cannot say that. Come on. He is a professional athlete, and professional athletes have a right and really absolute right.
I agree with you, and I have my right to my opinion. And I wish him the best in his retirement.
Did you see David Backus last night, the hockey player?
Yeah, that was emotional.
The Blues. He was a great player.
Right.
And he had his last game in St. Louis last night. And it was touching people.
It was
It
touching.
was, and athletes do not owe us,
Right.
making tens
And
of
I
millions
don't owe
of
him
sacrifices.
anything.
Somebody
It's
wants to
even.
overpay him.
He's a great
You're
guy.
not
I know
being-
he's done a
you're
lot of
not being
charity
asked,
work.
Charlie, if the
But at the end of
Cardinals
the day, he can't hit. That's
It
the
doesn't
problem.
matter,
That's
That's
why
what
he's
I'm
no longer an
saying.
angel.
The fact is, this idea that we should hold a grudge against a guy for
I'm
getting
not saying you should. I have a grudge.
There isn't a company in the country that would walks away from tens
No.
of dollars, much less a person.
Because you're not from Cleveland. You haven't been burnt like I have through the years. And where's LeBron playing? Never mind. Okay.
Never mind. Oh,
Now-
please, I hold a grudge. All this talk about Missouri and
Let's move
Kansas
on. We'll move
playing,
on.
I have a grudge. That should never happen.
Yeah, okay. Let's move on.
His talents
Ray
to Miami.
Hartmann, do you have a grudge against the Republicans in Jefferson City? Of course you don't. But they may pass a bill that will make protesting in the streets a felony if it's done 3 times. So let's say you're a protester, you're in the streets. The first time you're arrested, an infraction. Second time, misdemeanor. Third time, felony.
I'm not going to dignify this because the fact is they changed the subject from the criminal justice reform, decided to hijack it as part of their national. Let's keep one thing in mind. I won't accuse the Republicans of independent thought on this because this is coming from Alec. This is the same everywhere. They basically figured out the ways to target the way Black Lives Matter protests. And they might as well be arguing for just outlawing Black Lives Matter protests. It's got nothing to do with the specifics of this thing. Nothing.
Ray, I agree with you. Just one thing I'll throw in that this is something that can be overcome, just by rotating who protests and who doesn't. But just to clarify here, the majority of people who protest or who sit in the street support maybe Black Lives Matter, but they have nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. And I cringe whenever somebody says like, this is targeting Black Lives Matter. So like, no, it isn't. It's targeting Black people. But most of us would be doing it if there was a Black Lives Matter or not. So I think the argument, if you want to say it's racial, it's just about Black people. It is not about Black Lives Matter, other than that's the catchphrase that whips people into a frenzy.
I've seen a lot of white people during those demonstrations. So I mean, I do think that you're talking about major disruptions sometimes on interstate highways. I wish that something else could be done to control it. I don't think that that kind of thought is even possible anymore. But I think people do have a right to be upset about that kind of disruption.
Well, I'd say that I remember during the Ferguson unrest, getting on Highway 70, trying to get on Highway 70 to go to Ferguson, and the highway was blocked by protesters. And that night, my daughter called me and said, "Dad, guess what I was doing tonight or today?" And I said, "I have no idea."
Protesting.
She said, "I was blocking Highway 70." I said, "So did you?" Okay. Wendy's right. There's a lot of white people involved in these protests as well.
But that's not. I'll get back to it. They changed the subject.
Yeah. Oh, you're right, Ray. I'm not arguing with that.
It's supposed to be about police violence against Black people, and here we are, and everybody across the country. And Alvin's got the point. You're right. It's not Black. It was spurred by the Black Lives Matter protests in this case. But the point is, whether it's white people, Black people, whatever, we're on the wrong subject. We should be talking about police violence, and we're not.
Yeah.
Well,
hey,
you're
Ray,
the one
real
who told
quick.
us to, excuse us. Let me just freeze.
Go ahead.
You're the one who suggested this topic, Ray.
I mean,
don't
it's
say
a
that we
topic
shouldn't
to
be
talk
talking
why
about it.
we're on the wrong topic.
Ray, we were both at
Good point.
we were both at Don Wolf's funeral, and remember the late James Buford spoke, and he talked about when the like the higher echelon Black executives and whatnot blocked Highway 40 back in the day, and he said like Don Wolf was at the police station when he got there, and he was like gone in 10 minutes. I believe that will continue to happen even after this law is passed.
That's an interesting point. I saw James Buford get arrested when this would have been the summer of 2000 in a demonstration with MoCan, the He was arrested on Highway 70.
Yep, that's it. I said 40. I meant 70.
He did go to jail, but that's all part of it. That's the civil disobedience.
Right.
You know, if you break the law, you're supposed to be arrested, right? I mean, but what happens now is in the city of St. Louis last summer and the summer before, you get a police escort. You get a police escort on the highway. And so somebody like Bill, who might be heading to the hospital or the airport, who knows what, pick up the kids from daycare, is inconvenienced. And well, thank you. And we apologize for those technical difficulties, but we are back and moving on. Wendy Wiese to another topic, this time involving the circuit attorney, Kim Gardner, in the city of St. Louis. This week, Missouri's Chief Disciplinary Counsel found probable cause that the circuit attorney committed more than 50 ethical violations in her prosecution of Eric Greitens back in 2018. I know this almost sounds like ancient history, but it's a pretty serious issue, is it not? Her case will go in front of the Supreme Court, and it could rule that her license to practice law will be suspended or revoked. And in either case, by state statute, she'll immediately have to leave office and she'll be replaced by the governor. What do you think, Wendy?
Well, if I were the circuit attorney, I would certainly be I would be very concerned. John Ammons, professor emeritus at St. Louis University School of Law, who has appeared on this program before with us, when he says it's a pretty scary thing, pretty scary allegations for an attorney to be facing, much less a circuit attorney. If she is found to have impeded the administration of justice, even if it is somebody like Eric Greitens, who has now renewed his political career and no doubt will be using this to the hilt. That's not right when you're a circuit attorney, when you're a prosecuting attorney. And if she is found in concert with Mr. Tisby, her private investigator, who's charged with perjury and improperly handing over notes, if she did in fact not correct misinformation, then I would be worried.
I wouldn't be worried about anything. It's just not going to happen. This is more, we hate Kim Gardner and we're going to base our political careers on it. Missteps, yeah. You know, like, hey, has she done a bang up job all the time? Absolutely not. But this is just some more craziness. And I defy you to tell me if we started like, prosecutor did this, didn't correct somebody who either misspoke, lied, however you want to put it. That's not her job. That's the defense's job. And let's let all the criminals out that got convicted under these same circumstances. Prosecutors lie, police lie. Their job is to send people to prison. Now, did you pick the wrong guy to try to send to prison? Maybe so. But I'm not going to act like this goes on all the time. I don't think she breached anything. 50 charges is ridiculous. What, did she have the wrong colored dress on that day too? I mean, this is just silliness.
Alvin, I think it's more than silliness. She and Tisby had said that she didn't have any notes from her first meeting with the witness. In fact, she had typed up notes and sent them to Mr. Tisby. He took notes during the second deposition. She sat next to him. And neither of them told the judge that there were notes there. And in fact, at one point, according to the suppressed indictment, which came out 3 years ago, Robert Durker, the respected judge who is now working with her as a prosecutor, said, we should tell the police about Tisby's perjury. But she said, no, don't go to the police with this. And it actually gets worse because there was one lunch break where, she came back from lunch and Jim Martin, the former U.S. attorney who was acting on behalf of Eric Greitens, says, did you folks talk during lunch? They said, no, we didn't talk. We had no conversation. Well, then he subpoenaed the phone records, of course, and found out that they talked 7 times, including one 16-minute conversation. And she has an obligation by law to correct the record in certain cases when she's asked to do that by the judge. And I think she's got some issues here. I really do.
Well, I don't think I'm not a Kim Gardner fan at all. And I'm not aiming this at Alvin, but Kim Gardner's supporters are often like Trump supporters. I mean, you can't convince them that their guy or their woman has done anything wrong. And I thought what she did was very wrong. And, even you can't lie even to get somebody like Eric Greitens. And maybe other prosecutors have lied, Alvin. I'll give you that. I'll concede that point. But I think that Kim Gardner was a little more than inept. But I don't think anything will happen of it. I think
I don't think
look
anything.
at it and just say, let it lie.
Bill, I don't know that I call myself one of those supporters, but I tell you, I do think that she will be just fine. And I think the only person's lies that really, to me, are interesting in this case are those of Eric Greitens, who has been telling his own little version of the big lie to the John Solomons and all these wackos, and trying to say that if not for Kim Gardner, he would not have been run out so unjustly. Keep in mind that the woman whose case Kim Gardner brought went down to Jeff City and completely convinced legislators of both parties, overwhelming, that she was overwhelming.
Oh, I know, Ray. And
That's not the point, Ray.
No, it is the point.
No, that's what makes what Kim Gardner did the worst. If she would have just left well enough alone, this was a Republican coup. Eric Greitens would not be on the comeback trail. But she not only messed up the things with the hairdresser, but she had to dismiss the more serious case, I thought, the felony about using his charity for electoral purposes. She gave Eric Greitens new life.
Hey, let's be honest,
I
guys.
don't agree,
As
but
much as we did not like Eric Greitens, okay, that's fine. But you have to admit he is entitled to a fair trial where the lawyers on both sides play by the rules. And at one point when his attorneys were asking, and this is all in the indictment from June of 2018 or 19, I can't remember which, seems like ancient history, when he says, hey, I want the videotape of the deposition. He's entitled to that. And they said, well, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. The machine doesn't work. Well, they get the machine. It works perfectly. And it turns out she had never approached the IT person in the circuit attorney's office to see if the thing worked. I mean, it was
getting so into the weeds.
Yeah, I mean,
Charlie,
that's what it's about. Into the weeds, because that's what this is about.
All this is about is Eric Greitens' re-election campaign. No,
it's not.
In any other situation, this story would have been.
This is the law, and it is kind of ironic since justice is supposed to be blind, and what we know about blindfolds with the Eric Greitens case. Yeah. But Kim Gardner is the circuit attorney. She is the circuit attorney, whether you are white, whether you are black, whether you are given to this one political opinion or the other. Justice has to be served here.
Okay, well, all right. I will say this, that Kim Gardner, whenever this gets to the Supreme Court,
she's going to win.
She will have a defense attorney. And I guarantee you, it's going to sound a lot different coming out of that series of lawyers than it does right now.
And so I don't think she's got anything to worry about. And I think, with all respect, John Alman, who obviously is much wiser, I think that this is, when you back off and step, this was not some trial of the century with some horrible things. The stuff you're even talking about is such nuanced. It's just not.
But to suggest that because everybody violates, it's like, okay, well, this surgeon leaves that sponge in this surgical procedure, so I'm just going to look the other way while this surgeon. I mean,
you know what, Ray? I think it was a pretty significant trial when you have a duly elected governor who resigns as the result of.
She didn't. That's the point, Charlie. She had nothing to do with him resigning. The Republicans did. Bill said himself, and that's the point of this. Is it's about Eric Greitens and his re-election campaign, and he and Eric Schmidt are trying to outdo each other, running against Kim Gardner because they got no ideas.
Kim Gardner put herself in this situation, Ray. I mean, if she would have done nothing, Eric Greitens' political career would be over.
He's being held to a standard that no prosecutor I've ever seen has been held to. No.
Oh, come on.
No, I agree with Ray. I do. If she was trying to send somebody who everybody thought murdered somebody on the same stuff. Nobody was saying it.
There's a lot of those guys out there
And
that
there's a
never
whole
get
lot of them. Right.
A lot of the
don't
ones
think
that
so.
put people away knowing they were innocent because they want to get a notch on their belt. We don't even talk about those thousands of prosecutors, but this one because, oh, she did this and she did that. You know, give me a break.
Yeah.
It's
Okay, well, let's get rid of these rules then. Let's swap the rules
no,
of
no
suspension.
ethics.
As
No
long as they
ethics.
don't mean anything.
just
Yeah.
send Eric Greitens down.
And
to
for that matter, let's have, again, if police officers and prosecutors and others
so we
break
can
the law,
have more
that's
great
fine.
citizens like Eric Greitens.
Okay,
Well,
Bill
I can
McClellan.
hold a grudge because I lost a few weeks' paychecks when she dropped that
Oh, that's
case
right.
with the New York
you were working
Times.
for the New York Times. Hey, Bill McClellan,
Man, when you
I want to ask you about a proposal to put a quick trip on Grand at 44. It's part of a St. Louis University development along with SSM. And by the way, I think Ken Haller from SSM is going to be with us later today. I don't think we'll talk about this with him. But nonetheless, some people are saying, come on, we're trying to revitalize the neighborhood and you're putting up a quick trip. But the neighborhood association kind of likes it because they could get about $6,000 a year from this quick trip if it's built. Probably not exactly what most people trying to revitalize their neighborhood were looking for. What do you say, Bill?
Well, Jacob Barker wrote an excellent story in the paper today, and I'm not so sure that the neighbors are behind this or the neighborhood association. I mean, the woman in charge of that was not very cooperative with Jacob. I think that since this was a development that was going to be very impressive and a part of the revitalization of Midtown and St. Louis University was going to be steering it, I was a little disappointed, more than a little disappointed, when they came up with, something that would be really like architecturally and just a sound idea. Why don't we have a quick trip? I thought, really, that's the best you can do? I was not very impressed.
Well, when I moved back, I had this philosophy that St. Louis needed to use two things more, the answer no and the trash can. And I have changed my thinking. I'm now more toward the beggars cannot be choosers kind of philosophy. Now, what's wrong with a quick trip by 44 and Grand, which is at the absolute pretty much end of, St. Louis University's campus, and it helps the neighborhood. And we're talking about places that don't have like a nice convenience store. And so I've got no problem with the quick trip. Now, if they're going to make it like a strip mall all the way down to, Olive, I got a problem with that. But just a quick trip, it brings revenue. It brings liveliness. It brings...
Couldn't you find something better? I mean, and the neighbor who has that historic house right next to it is very much against it. I mean, like I can see, okay, this links Captain D's restaurant on this side with the quick trip here. It just doesn't do anything.
That's not a signature. That's not a signature architectural statement, is
Well,
it?
is the Guggenheim gonna move here? I mean, it's right on the highway.
Dog museum.
Yeah.
I want to tell Alvin something. Alvin, you know better than this. You go to Kirkwood and there's a great bakery called Nathaniel Reid. I think it's your brother. And, that's what neighborhoods need. Bakeries and bookstores and flower shops. And I love Quick Trip overall, but this is going to service the people who are on Highway 44. They're going to stop, they're going to fill up, they're going to take off.
Well, but no, wait. Now, one thing, Charlie, directly across the street is a liquor store and like an auto repair tire place. That's what's across the street. And we have a Quick Trip like on Big Ben at 44, and it gets used. Greater Kirkwood doesn't think that the quick trip near the highway is some kind of eyesore or takes away our, haughty, self-esteem, which we have a lot of in Kirkwood. So thus, I just don't have a problem with it.
I personally, first of all, I've actually never heard the sentence, I love Quick Trip. I mean, I do. I mean, I don't dislike them.
More than life itself.
They're useful. But I would say unless they figure out a way to put some maybe if they had some columns on it or something, it felt like an academic building, then it was like you were going to study hall, but you were actually going to a quick trip.
That's a good idea.
I just think that
you know what? That's a good idea, Ray. Like the mobile that's located at Big Bend in Clayton, where it's kind of hidden.
It was
Very good point.
iconic
I
or
saw
something.
one like that in Shaker Heights, Ohio. Believe it or not, the gas station was hidden. You're onto something.
Well, I think the idea of the redevelopment was to do a little better.
Why didn't we just put it in a brown paper sack? Okay.
3-minute warning, 3 minutes. Let's go to Clayton now, where the town officials are thinking about restricting lawn mowing by contracting companies, landscaping firms, that they couldn't cut your lawn or blow the leaves before 9 a.m. on Saturdays or after 5 because it's too early. And no one after 5 o'clock wants to hear the leaf blowers while they're barbecuing and sitting on the deck, right? So, Alvin Reid, do you agree with Clayton that it should restrict the hours for lawnmowers by landscapers?
Absolutely not. Man's home, woman's home is their castle. And if they want to mow the lawn at 5:30 on Saturday, they should be able to mow the lawn at 5:30 on Saturday.
Oh, but they can, right? It's the lawn services. The owners can.
The owner could do that. You're right.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, who cares cuts the grass? I mean, like, oh, so I can cut my grass at 5:30 on Saturday, but the lawn service can't cut my grass. Now, what sense does that make? Clayton, calm down. People mow their lawns or get their lawns mowed when they do. I like it. It smells like fresh grass. It sounds like America.
Well, you have to understand, Clayton. I mean, like, you know, one of the big decisions is usually like, what color should the new fire engine be? Should we go with lime green or would yellow be good? So this is a good Clayton issue. And
this is a big issue.
I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I think it's a good issue.
I am squarely for red fire engines, just to be clear. But I would say that it doesn't, while I think obviously every municipality can do it at once, there is a certain logic in saying you can mow your lawn, but the lawn service can't because it's too loud. Because
what are those boats called in the swamp? Are those like air boats?
Yeah.
Is that what
I don't
they're
understand
called?
it.
Fan boats. Fan boats.
Fan boats. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of the lawn services that are used in our neighborhood, that is what it sounds like. So I understand the impulse to try to sleep a little bit later on the weekend. I mean, seriously, they can move the foundation of your house. They're very serious about lawn care, these lawn services.
So maybe it should be hand mowers before 9.
Perhaps. I think if this is your most pressing issue, then things are going okay for you. That's all I got to say.
It may not be the most pressing, but there it is. And I think the officials are meeting next week. We'll have an update for you next week. We're going to take a break here and come back with Ken Haller from the St. Louis University School of Medicine. We'll talk about kids and COVID. Don't touch that dial.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Thanks for joining us for Next Up, where we interview leaders of our region and go around the horn with one question after another. Today on the hot seat, Dr. Ken Haller, professor of pediatrics at the St. Louis University School of Medicine and SSM, Cardinal Glennon Children's Medical Center. Dr. Haller is past president of the Missouri chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics and has served on the board of the Missouri Foundation of Health. Thank you very much, doctor, for joining us. How are you?
Great. My pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking.
Well, I think the first question is COVID and kids, and I guess the latest, who should be getting the vaccination? What kids, what ages at this time?
Well, right now, the vaccine is the Moderna vaccine is approved for kids, adolescents, young adults, age 18 and up. The Pfizer vaccine is age 16 and up. But right now, it looks like we're probably going to be getting some data very soon to show that the Pfizer vaccine, which is being tested in kids as young as 12, will be getting some approval for that. Now, the reason we're going in this sort of stepwise fashion is that kids, thankfully, have been the least affected as a population. And so we wanted to make sure that these vaccines are safe and effective in adults and then we can start stepping down and testing it in younger kids who frankly have a harder time giving informed consent, and just making sure that we're not doing something that's completely experimental. But I'm hoping that within the next few weeks we'll be able to vaccinate kids age 12 and above, and then after that it's being tested in kids even younger than that, and we'll have more data as the summer goes on.
Alvin.
Well, I want to follow up on that. President Biden said Tuesday, used the quote, when the vaccine for the kids that age is approved, said the nation is ready to move. Now, what does that mean exactly? Like, will it be that if you want to get vaccinated at your school, that'll be possible? Or is it more that I would say that they're going to need more vaccination sets, but they already have too many in some places. So what do you think he means by that, like that ready to move?
I think what he means is that right now, of course, to get vaccinated, you've had to go to a vaccine center or a special place. And really, most people want to get vaccinated at their doctor's office, and that hasn't been possible yet. So I'm hoping that that's what will happen. In fact, in the surveys I've been seeing of people in terms of, who are having a little bit of question about the vaccine, what they want to hear is from their doctor that it is safe. And when they hear that from their doctor in their office, they want to be able to get the vaccine there. I did get an email today saying that one of the major pharmacy chains in the United States is now offering the COVID vaccine in pharmacy, which is a great next step. And being able to bring that down to the private practice and clinic level is going to be the next step to making this something that can be, just available to anyone who needs it.
Dr. Haller, is vaccine hesitancy worse as the ages go lower, say to 12 to 15? Does it become more of a problem in terms of parents and kids, or about the same or less than it has been with adults?
Well, vaccine hesitancy is for kids. I mean, kids, they're just going to get it. If their parents say you're going to get it, you're going to get it. In terms of parents and having kids get vaccines, just general vaccine hesitancy does seem to be most of concern to parents when kids are youngest, because they think that they don't want to give them something that they have questions about. The irony, of course, is the reason we vaccinate young kids against things like pertussis and diphtheria and Haemophilus is that the younger you are, the more likely it is that if you get sick with one of these infections, you're going to get very sick with it. And that's why we want to get the youngest kids vaccinated against these life-threatening illnesses as early as possible. I will say with COVID vaccine hesitancy, it is a little bit different. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that this is a new vaccine. And I think a lot of people are just waiting and seeing what happens with their friends and in their community and how people are reporting it. So that's why I know as a healthcare provider myself, I was lucky enough to get vaccinated very early. I was fully vaccinated by the middle of January. And pretty much every doctor, nurse, everyone in healthcare that I know was putting that out on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram saying, I got vaccinated, I feel fine. When you can get it, get it. And that's a very important message to put out. It's not, I got it, you didn't. It's, we really want everyone to get this. We are putting our own bodies on the line and we're doing fine with it. And we want you to get it too.
Bill?
Doctor, last summer there was a small outbreak at a day camp that my grandchildren were at, and they called and said, everyone should get tested. And my granddaughter tested positive. Mm-hmm. So we thought, oh my goodness, because my daughter and grandson live in a small confines with my granddaughter, and we thought they're probably going to get sick. And then no one seemed to get infected from my granddaughter. She never seemed to get sick. My daughter and grandson were tested and they didn't get anything. Has there been any sort of a problem with kids infecting each other or their parents?
Well, kids, it's been very interesting the way kids have reacted to this. Like I said earlier, most kids who get infected don't get that sick. There's this one thing called multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, MISC, which a very small number of kids get. And if they get that, they get really sick. Most kids, if they get it, will have very mild symptoms. And The theory is that the receptors that kids have in their nose and their throat, which is where you pick these things up, are different in kids than adults. And the coronavirus just doesn't seem to be able to hang on to it. So even if kids get infected with it, it's going to sort of slide out really quickly. It's the difference between taking a stone and skipping it across a lake, and it'll go so far and then it'll sink. But if that lake's frozen and you skip it across, it'll go all the way across the lake. And in that analogy, which may not be very good, but a kid's nose is kind of like the frozen lake, and an adult's nose is more like the watery liquid lake. So kids can get infections that are pretty transient, and they may not pass them on to those around them. Still, it will be important once vaccines are approved for younger and younger kids, for those kids to get vaccinated too, because especially teenagers, those are the ones who are more likely to pass it to one another in social settings and school settings.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy?
Dr. Haller, we know that there has certainly been something of a mental health crisis among adults within the pandemic, and it's not fair to put you on the spot because you're dealing with physical health of your patients. But what can you tell us about the emotional well-being of most of the children that you have seen during this pandemic? As we move past this pandemic, hopefully, what does that look like?
Well, this has been frankly, I think to start off, I think that we used a lot of really poor language at the beginning of this. Using the term social distancing, I think, has been a disaster. We didn't want social distancing. We wanted physical distancing. And social distancing implies that you should not have any social interaction with anybody, which you can do through this. Even something like lockdown sounds like you're going into prison. And so the thing is, I think that as a society, we created some terms that set people up to have problems with depression and with isolation. I know that in my practice, I've seen, when I sit in the office and I, have my mask on, I will say to every parent, "How are you doing with all this?" And a lot of them are saying it's been really, really rough. I think that, the more we can do to promote social interactions in whatever way is safe and still prevents contagion is really important. For kids have gone in a lot of different directions. There are a lot of kids who really miss school and they miss the social interaction with other kids. There are other kids, frankly, who have smaller numbers, but there have been kids who flourished getting schooling, getting virtual school. These are kids often who have been the victims of bullies in a physical school setting, kids who are in ethnic minorities who are often targeted, by the school system as being, sort of troublemakers, and often are punished just because of perceptions that teachers have. So, one of the things I think we need to look at as we go forward, particularly with kids and mental health, is not just saying it's all over, we can forget about it and go back to normal, but really looking at what bad effects came out of this and how can we ameliorate that. But what was, for some kids, was good, what was actually better for them, and how can we make sure that we can meet the needs of those kids too, these children of color, children who have other kinds of problems where they might get marginalized in a school setting, and when at home they're able to be in a more comfortable place.
Do you think, though, that along with the pandemic, has there been among younger Americans an epidemic of anxiety and depression? I read the student newspaper at WashU where they say that the mental health offices are, they're overflowing with patients. You can't get an appointment, or this information is about 2 months old. Maybe it was the winter blues. I don't know. But I hear stories about younger people in high school and grade school who really are suffering mentally. Now, are you seeing this?
Oh yeah, we're seeing this most definitely. Like I said, some kids do well, but a lot of kids are having real problems because, we are social beings, and the rates of depression, the rates of self-harming behaviors, do seem to be way up, particularly among young people. Again, I think that we have, as much as we have needed to maintain physical distance, to have made sure we're wearing masks and things like that, I will say that sometimes we have been too single-minded in that, not saying that shouldn't happen, but rather than just dismissing things and saying, hey, we want to save your life, you got to do this, just saying, yeah, it's really tough. This is a really tough thing we're going through. And every one of us is going through it. I mean, I doubt that there's anyone watching tonight or anyone even on this panel who hasn't had moments of just feeling kind of foggy in the past few months of like, where did I put my keys? And did I eat breakfast today? And why am I wearing these socks for the past 3 days? I mean, that's the kind of thing that when we get out of our routines and we're separated from one another, we do become unmoored. And kids in particular have been suffering because of that. And so I think that when people are saying, I want to be with other people, we shouldn't just dismiss it. We should say, yeah, I do too. I do too. We all want that. And we have to do it in a way that's going to maintain our physical health as we deal with our mental and social and spiritual health.
Alvin.
Well, all right. Well, one, Doctor, that was a tremendous analogy with the rock skipping over the ice. It's the kind of thing that I remember forever. So I'm going to steal that and use it at some time. Two, I've had 3 haircuts in the last 14 months, which I did myself. I forgot I could look like this because I actually got a real haircut for the first time. And so, I forgot I could look like this. Now I'm going to make you the COVID king of Missouri or the United States for a second. Now, if I owned a professional, sports franchise, I would demand that all of my players got vaccinated. Because listen, it's your job. You got to be here to do it. Mm-hmm. If schools, especially public ones, say, look, if you're coming back to in-classroom learning, you have to be vaccinated. Or businesses say, if you're going to work here, you have to be vaccinated. If you were king, would you say that that's a good thing, or is that too much of an infringement on people's individual rights?
I think that is a good thing. And the thing is, I understand that people may, say I have a right to do this or a right to do that. I also have the right to be a member of a society, but with rights come responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities is not to do something that's going to hurt someone else. Again, I don't know how good an analogy this is, but it's, smoking. It took a long time for St. Louis to get to the point where smoking was banned in public accommodations, in bars and restaurants. And I remember that weird few years in St. Louis where unless you served food, this and that, and there were bars people would go to and others wouldn't. I didn't realize until that ban went into effect what a difference it made. And it was wonderful to go to places. And there were some restaurants I liked that I just didn't go to for a few years because they continued to allow smoking, because not just because it smelled bad, but because I didn't want to subject myself to it. I think that businesses should be allowed to say that these are our requirements. You have to do this to come in here. That especially professional sports teams, schools. I mean, there are requirements now for school for vaccination against things like measles, which is, even more infective than this coronavirus, as well as various other things. And as a society, it really is important for us to say that we do expect everyone to do this, because one of the things about spread of disease is, for every percentage of the population that's not vaccinated, the chance of people coming into contact with one another and causing an outbreak goes up geometrically. So when something goes up arithmetically, in terms of not vaccinating, the possibility of an outbreak goes up geometrically. And, I think that people who don't want their kids to get sick also have the right to say, I want other kids in my child's school to be vaccinated against this so I can feel safe when I send my child to school.
Dr. Howard, first of all, thank you for the plausible explanation about my fogginess. I like that.
You only get it for this year, Ray. Just for
we all got a year
for a few years, but thank you. You are a leader in the LGBTQ community in St. Louis, in the area of medicine for sure. And I think it's fair to say that the Missouri legislature is not. There's been a bit of legislation, actually quite a bit of talk. I'll say targeting trans people,
Mhm.
as is happening across the country. What has that had an impact on people you serve and know in the trans community?
Yeah, I have been. Uh, I was the board president of PROMO, which is Missouri statewide LGBT civil rights organization, for about 6 years, and the trans community is really suffering right now. The you know to I think that these bills that what were called bathroom bills, about people have to use the public bathroom that fits the gender they were assigned at birth, and particularly these sports bills, are very, very just really difficult to deal with for a person who's transgender. Again, I'm not transgender, but what I can say is that if and even though effectively the number of transgender athletes in school may be very small, for your legislature to say that people like you are not allowed to participate in this level of public engagement that is open to everyone else is just so hurtful. It's just a devastating thing. And so we really need to think about how we can make sure that we're all cared for. One of the things, and again, I mean, the reason I was so involved with PROMO is that I'm a cisgender gay man myself. So cisgender means that what I was assigned at birth is what I'm fine with. And on some level, I don't quite get transgender. I don't understand it. It's not something that is part of my makeup. But I have to get that someone who's transgender gets it, that this is who they are, and I have to respect who they are. The same way that when I talk to people who are straight who say, I don't get this whole gay thing, it's like, you don't have to. You just have to get that I get it. And that I still interact, as long as I interact with other people in a way that respects who they are, that I respect other people in my relationships, that I allow, that I try to create a society that respects everyone in terms of who they are in the fullness of their personhood. That's what we should be all about. And these bills have just been terribly damaging to transgender people. And I think it also sends a message to other people who may be a little bit outside the mainstream, that to wonder, am I going to be next?
And Bill, if you don't mind, if I jump in here with a follow-up, Dr. Haller,
Sure.
Because if you could explain to parents who are fearful, they perhaps they don't want any harm to come psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, physically to a trans child, but they're trying to wrap their own heads around the fact that maybe their daughter, who is not able to compete at the same level as maybe a transgender, a young woman who is transitioning. Can you help us understand that from the transgender point of view? Because to a parent, they're concerned that the odds are stacked against their daughter or what have you.
Oh, I totally get that. And when people bring these questions to me, I'm not going to say, what's the matter with you and how horrible you are. I'm going to say, yeah, I get that you love your child and you want the best for your child. And we all want that. One of the things that I think is people don't understand about being transgender is it's not something where you just go, there I go. It's a long process. There are two organizations one called World Professional Association of Transgender Health, or WPATH, and the Endocrine Society of North America, and they're the ones who deal with these issues on a medical level. For someone who is a young person who is saying that, I am not the gender that I was assigned and that my body seems to say I am, that's just the beginning of a long process. In order to do anything, first of all, that person has to get a psychological evaluation by someone who is really who really knows what they're doing in this. And that is a very long process. To then get to the point, then there's a 3-step medical process. The first step of it is what are called hormone blockers, which stop the pubertal process going forward. But that doesn't even start until a person is at what's called Tanner 2 stage of development. Tanner 1 is basically, little kid. Tanner 2 is when you're developing, arm hair and things like that. And you're starting to get head in that direction. that is reversible, because if, as the psychological evaluation goes on, that young person says, I actually think that this is not what I want, you can stop it and the body picks up where you left off. To get to the next level, which is where you start taking hormones of the target sex, of the gender that you say that that you say, this is who I am. No professional organization recommends that before the age of 16, and usually later. Then, in terms of confirmatory surgery that would be done, no professional organization or anyone I know anywhere in the country would even think of doing that before age 18, and usually later. And in fact, a lot of people don't even get that done until, much later, don't get it done at all. So the thing is that even in terms of identity, there are a lot of steps to this. And frankly, I think it was the governor of West Virginia where they passed, I think it was West Virginia, where a bill like this was passed. And this governor was asked, do you know of a case where a transgender young woman was on a team and caused a problem? And he said, actually, I don't know of one. And frankly, I don't know of one either. It is extremely, extremely rare. And I think that would be something where everyone at a school would just have to sit down and have an honest conversation about where we go with this to make sure that everyone's needs are served.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And doctor, I don't get it at all. You mentioned you don't. I mean, I get it less than you. But how common is it? You're dealing with these transgender children. How I've heard different figures for how much of the population is gay, and I don't know how reliable those are. But give us a rough idea of how common transgender is.
It is a very difficult. It's a very difficult question to answer. Both in terms of, because we're talking about gender identity, the way the person identifies with their gender. And frankly, that's even something that has changed. I mean, I think that all of us are, in a demographic where we thought of male, female. What has happened over time is that people are now looking at, well, maybe there's more to it than that. Maybe, there are people who say that I do not have a gender. I am agender. I am, or non-gendered. And so, that is, again, a concept that's kind of, foreign to me, but I guess I can understand that when someone says, I feel this way and I feel that way, and I fall in love with who I fall in love with. So there's a difference between, between saying that someone's saying they're bisexual, someone who's bisexual says, I am attracted to men and attracted to women, versus someone who says they're pansexual, which means I'm attracted to people regardless of whether they even declare a gender or not. I kind of think of this as, because again, I grew up in a very different mindset, as I think we all did. Once more people are able to discover things about themselves and to push the envelope a little further to say, this is where we've been, and this is where I think I really am. It's kind of like how the universe, we thought of first as having the sun in the center, the planets went around it. I'm sorry, the Earth in the center, and the sun and the planets went around the Earth. And then we saw that the sun was in the center. And then we saw that there's stuff outside of our solar system. And each time we push the envelope, we discover a little bit more. And in terms of human consciousness about gender identity and sexual orientation, this is kind of what I see a lot of young people doing. Again, a lot of it, it doesn't resonate with me, but I have to accept that it resonates with these people. So that's my very long answer to say, in terms of numbers, nobody really knows. Probably, very, very, very rough, but between people who are, LGBTQ, probably somewhere between 2% and 10% of the population. And that's a really, really, really broad number. But
that includes gay people,
that includes gay people, yeah. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender,
right.
Queer, questioning, things like that. Even, I mean, frankly, even the use of the word queer, I still have a hard time using it, because when I was a kid, I was called that, and it was not a good thing. So I hear about queer studies at universities, and frankly, I still cringe a little bit, because I am 66 and that's who I am. But I also know that other people use it in when they use it as a way of affirming something that goes beyond what I had the ability to even conceive of.
Boy, Doctor, so much information, too little time. We only have 30 seconds to go. But since you are an academic, can you recommend further reading for our viewing audience, for people who want to pursue this a little more?
Oh, gee, there is a, oh, shoot, that's a great question.
Sorry to stump you on that one, because you're like me. It's on the tip of your tongue until you're asked about it live on television.
There's a great book, and I can't remember the author, but I think it's called Far from the Tree, and it's about an 800-page book of people's stories, of people who have very different ways of looking at the world. I'm afraid I can't remember the author's name, but
tell you what, you get it.
I think
we'll have it next week. We'll share it with our viewing audience on the next edition of Donnybrook or Next Up. Ken Haller, you're the best. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you next week at this time.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.